Hey everyone, this isn't going to be like my usual Zelda videos. This may even end up being a mini-series depending on if people like it. This mini-series will see Zelda games going head to head based on certain categories to find out which one is the better Zelda game. Like in this case, I'm going to settle the debate on which game I think is better between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. This is going to be a non-biased video, and just so you know, I love both these games a lot. I played them both as a kid and loved them both then and love them both now. I am by no means hating on either game, I'm just going to cover the flaws and perfections between each Zelda title. If you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to hit the subscribe button and like the video. I am planning on doing another video like this covering the better Zelda game between Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword. Now before I begin, I want to point out that I will be covering 4 main categories. These are as follows: the main story, the dungeons, the music, and lastly, the side quests. Now with all that cleared up, let's jump into it. The story. Is there anything more important than the journey of our green tunic hero? Ocarina of Time's story is a much more generic Zelda story compared to Majora's Mask. To put it simply, Ocarina of Time sees our hero saving a princess and stopping the evil bad guy from ruling the world. But although it sounds simple enough, the game is actually a lot more complex than it should have been for its time. Link's journey opens with Navi, Link's companion of the game, and the Great Deku Tree, the protector of the Kokiri kids who live within the Kokiri forest. Link learns much about the world of Hyrule, and also about Princess Zelda and the evil Ganondorf who wishes to rule the world. Princess Zelda plays a pivotal role within the game. She informs Link of Ganondorf's plans and explains the purpose of the Triforce. Link's child section of the game sees him overcoming small trials and challenges by obtaining 3 spiritual stones from 3 different regions. The first from the Great Deku Tree in the forest, the second from Darunia, the leader of the Gorons in the mountains, and thirdly and finally, Ruto from Zora's domain gifts Link the 3rd stone after Link cures Jabba Jabba. Personally, I hate all 3 of these dungeons, but I do see why they exist, because after the 3 stones are placed on the altar within the Temple of Time and Link retrieves the Master Sword, the game really does turn up a notch. When Link pulls the Master Sword from his pedestal, he falls into a 7-year deep sleep within the Sacred Realm. This then allows Ganondorf to steal the Triforce from the Sacred Realm, and when Ganondorf tries to steal the Triforce splits into 3 parts, and only the Triforce of Power remains with him. Wisdom goes to Zelda, and courage goes to Link. Rauru, the Light Sage within the Sacred Realm, explains to Link that his destiny is to awaken and be the hero of time and stop Ganondorf. The second half of the game sees Link chasing down the other 5 sages scattered around the world of Hyrule. This is explained by Sheik, who later ends up being Princess Zelda in disguise, who is the leader of the sages. The forest sages are childhood friend Saria. The fire sage is Darunia. The water sage is Ruto. The sage with shadow is Impa, Zelda's protector. And finally, we have Nabooru, the spirit sage who worked for Ganondorf. After gaining the powers from all the sages in the form of a medallion, Zelda is then captured and Link has to face Ganondorf in an epic 2-stage fight. Of course, Link is successful and Ganondorf is then trapped within the Sacred Realm, and the people of Hyrule are saved, and Link returns to his own time. Overall, the story here is very good, but also very static and a safer option. They didn't really take many risks and kept it pretty basic and traditional. But what about Majora's Mask? Now Majora's Mask is by far the most sinister and unique game I've ever played. It's so much different from every other Zelda game before it and still stands alone to this day. Majora's Mask is not set in the world of Hyrule like Ocarina of Time and other Zelda games. It's set in the world of Termina, a kind of alternate world to Hyrule. The people of Termina share similar appearances and traits to the people of Hyrule, and although they look the same, they feel very different from one another. Majora's Mask doesn't focus on Princess Zelda or Ganondorf, it focuses on an evil mask, a mask called Majora. The opening cutscene sees us being robbed by an imp called Skull Kid wearing a creepy, suspicious looking mask. When Link chases Skull Kid through the Lost Woods, he falls into a dark abyss. This pitch black pit is believed to be the very entrance that leads into the world of Termina. Skull Kid changes Link into a Deku Scrub, and you play the whole first section of the game as this spinning tree. Link's companion of the game is a fairy named Tail. Link spends most of his time collecting masks and collecting transformation masks, which he uses to complete many dungeons. The Happy Mask salesman from Ocarina of Time is one of the main characters in this game and plays a vital role to the story. He sets Link on a quest to retrieve Majora's mask for him, as it was his mask that Skull Kid stole, and explains that the mask is an evil mask created by a tribe during a hexing ritual. The plot to the game is an interesting one. The moon, which resides above Clocktown, the main hub of the game, is scaring the residents by edging closer to Clocktown and threatening to kill everyone and destroying everything. Skull Kid is possessed by Majora's mask and is doing the evil deeds around Termina, including forcing the moon to slowly collide with Clocktown. In the four main regions of the game, Swamp, Mountain, Ocean and Canyon, Majora's caused chaos for the residents in the regions. The swamp is poisoned and impossible to cross. The mountains are almost uninhabitable due to being frozen. The ocean is facing storms and is impossible to navigate. And lastly, the canyon is a desolate, cursed wasteland roamed by the dead. All these effects are due to Majora sealing away the guardians and protectors of Termina. Link must free the giants from the four regions so that they can stop the moon from crashing. Now the biggest part to this game is that Link only has 3 days to complete his task before having to reset the time to the first day again. But to stop the moon requires all 4 guardians present, which means the time needs to be reset multiple times in order to stop the moon and reach Majora. Many people hate this mechanic to the game. I also used to hate this as a kid growing up too, but as I got older I realised how genius this was. But let me explain. Ocarina of Time is an at your own pace game. It's pretty chill and overall doesn't really give me any emotions apart from nostalgia. Majora's Mask, on the other hand, gives me constant anxiety and excitement throughout any playthrough. The constant pressure to complete a task within a time frame while trying to manage certain side quests and dungeons is enough to keep me interested and entertained. The game gives me a constant rush, but I can also see why people don't like the pressure this game makes you feel. Anyway, after Link helps all 4 races in each region by beating the dungeon which the Guardians are trapped within, Link is left to face Majora within the crashing moon, which proves to be one of the most challenging boss fights ever, thus providing you don't use the Fierce Deity's mask anyway. After Majora is defeated, Link returns the mask back to the Happy Mask salesman, and it's then revealed that the evil has left the mask and Termina is saved and the residents are happy once more. So now I have briefly covered the main plots for both games, so which one holds up the best story? Now in this case it's very tempting to pick Ocarina of Time based on its linear story, but in terms of the more interesting and deeply sinister story, I have to pick Majora's Mask. Ocarina of Time's story was a very good story, but one we have seen in most Zelda titles. Majora's Mask, on the other hand, is unique, and the Nintendo team really took big risks that paid off and helped the game to shine. So for the clear winner of this category being the best story, goes to Majora's Mask. This category is a bit of a difficult one, because both Ocarina and Majora have excellent dungeons. Majora only has 4 main dungeons, so the number of dungeons will not affect which game I pick, otherwise it would easily be Ocarina of Time having more dungeons. So instead I'll be judging them on complexity, as well as their design and enjoyment. Ocarina of Time boasts a whopping 9 dungeons, with 2 mini dungeons. I'm choosing to exclude the mini dungeons, which are the Ice Cavern and the bottom of the well. I'm also going to exclude the 3 child dungeons, as these are way too easy and not really considered proper dungeons. Starting with the Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time. The Forest Temple is by far the best temple in the game. I've played this game well over 100 times and this is the only temple that still confuses me. The puzzles are great, the design is great, and the boss fight with Phantom Ganon is also incredibly fun, and of course, the dungeon item is the legendary bow. This temple is a prime example of what a Zelda dungeon should be. The Fire Temple is easily the worst adult temple in the game. It's way too easy and incredibly boring to play and look at. The boss fight with Volvagia though is my second favourite boss fight in the game. A great example of a fun and unique fight that makes good use of the dungeon's item, the hammer. While still a great dungeon, it doesn't compare with the other dungeons in the game. Next is the dreaded and hated Water Temple. Much like everyone else, I am not overly keen on this temple, but at the same time I don't hate it either. The extended hookshot is a great dungeon item, and the fight with Shadow Link is amazing. The setting is also one of my favourites in the game, and in terms of complexity, the Water Temple does do its job in confusing the player, but it also makes the player incredibly frustrated. Now while the 3DS version did make this temple a bit more enjoyable to play, the temple itself isn't great. The boss fight with Morpha is still terrible, and the dungeon isn't overly fun, and it's also incredibly tedious to complete, but that still doesn't mean it's a bad dungeon. The Shadow Temple is another temple that gets a lot of hate, mainly for being too easy. Now while I do agree this temple is pretty damn easy, it certainly isn't the worst dungeon in the game. The setting leaves you feeling creeped out, which causes pressure and anxiety. The hover boots are definitely not the best dungeon item, but the fight with Deadan makes up for that. The complexity of the dungeon is fairly simple, and the end fight with Bongo Bongo isn't hard or that exciting, but I still wouldn't say it's a bad dungeon. The atmosphere here is what really shines the most. The Spirit Temple is actually my personal favourite dungeon in the game. The desert setting really gets me pumped to start this temple. You play one half as Child Link and the other half as Adult Link, also finding 2 dungeon items, the Mirror Shield and the Gauntlets. The puzzles are pretty fun, and the fight with Iron Knuckle is iconic, and even the boss fight with Twin Rover is a very well constructed boss fight. The Spirit Temple is a perfectly rounded dungeon that puts the Fire Temple to shame. And lastly we have Ganon's Tower. Certainly not the best dungeon, but certainly not the worst. The Golden Gauntlets are the dungeon item here, and serve as a way of gaining access to a couple of entrances. The tasks and puzzles are somewhat decent and enjoyable, but not really challenging or difficult. Considering it's the final dungeon, you would expect more of a challenge. The setting though is pretty good here, especially when you're working your way up to the top of the tower, and the end fight with Ganondorf and then Ganon isn't too bad either. My only problem is that the dungeon itself isn't overly difficult or complex, but overall the dungeons in Ocarina of Time are pretty solid. Majora's Mask only has 4 main dungeons: Woodfall, Snowhead, Great Bay and Stone Tower. Woodfall is the first and most basic dungeon. I would say it's pretty average and comparable to the Fire Temple. It's not very complex and the scenery is fairly boring to look at, to be honest. The most interesting part is probably obtaining the bow. I mean, the fight with Adolwa is okay I guess, but he doesn't pose much of a threat. But even though it's average, I would still rate it above a lot of the dungeons we have seen in future Zelda titles. Snowhead on the other hand really turns up the heat, an awesome setting with fun puzzles. My first time playing this dungeon I was stuck for hours until I eventually ran out of time. My second playthrough however, I figured out that the pillar in the centre could be punched to remove chunks of ice, and shorten the pillar, giving me access to areas I could not reach before. The dungeon item isn't great, but the boss fight we've got is pretty damn fun, so overall a well designed dungeon that adds some complexity and problem solving. Now Great Bay is the dungeon that the Water Temple should have been. It's complicated while still being interesting and simple. Great Bay is focused on manipulating the water flow to reach different areas of the dungeon. The way it's done is perfect as it doesn't force the player to go back 20 plus times. Again, the dungeon item is pretty trash, but the boss fight with Georg is pretty challenging and surprisingly good. Another perfect example of a classic Zelda dungeon. And lastly we have the Stone Tower Temple, known as the God Tier Temple, and I agree that this temple is the pinnacle and most perfected Zelda temple ever created. It's by far the most complex and entertaining temple to date. It's challenging and not so forgiving. What really makes this dungeon so unique and confusing is that the dungeon needs to be flipped upside down in order to complete it. This then creates a whole new dungeon within the same dungeon. This mechanic is used to solve puzzles and reach areas that were not reachable before. The mini bosses Gomez and the Garo Master and the end boss Twin Mold were all extremely fun to face and beat. Stone Tower Temple is by far the most perfect dungeon that exists to date, and I think that it will be very challenging to top. Ocarina of Time certainly has the most dungeons, but quantity isn't always better than quality, which shows in this case. Ocarina has some very good dungeons, but most of which are average compared to others we have seen. Now I'm by no means saying that any of these dungeons are terrible, because they are all genius in their own right, but compared to Stone Tower Temple, even the Forest Temple doesn't come close. Stone Tower and Great Bay are enough to edge Majora to winning the category for best dungeons. Both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask share similar songs. A perfect example of this is the Song of Time that is used in both games. In Majora it is used to revert the time, and in Ocarina of Time it is used to open the door of time and solve various puzzles. But the song was originally made for Ocarina of Time, so it counts for Ocarina and not Majora. Ocarina of Time's soundtrack is by far the best in the series, from Hyrule Field's overworld theme to the Gerudo Fortress. This game is packed with absolute bangers. The Song of Storms, Zelda's Lullaby, the Temple of Time theme, and even Ganon's Castle are all great tracks. There is no denying that this game's soundtrack is near perfect. Majora's Mask does have some great tracks as well though, most notably the Stone Tower theme, but also songs such as Clocktown, Final Hours, Elegy of Emptiness, and even Oath to Order. Both games sport excellent songs, but it's a no-brainer that Ocarina of Time should take this category. Even the best song in Majora's Mask, the Song of Healing, would not have been used had it not been used in Ocarina of Time first. So the winner for this category easily goes to Ocarina of Time. Once again, this category would not be judged on the quantity of side quests, otherwise Majora would easily take the crown now, but instead will be judged on the enjoyment and overall uniqueness of the quest. Ocarina has a decent amount of side quests, ranging from the Happy Mask Shop quest to getting a Pono at Lon Lon Ranch. But in terms of side quests that actually matter and reward the player, I can only really think of 3. Obviously, getting a Pono is one of the better side quests in the game that actually gives you a great reward. A Pono can be used to travel across Hyrule Field, making it a lot less hassle having to run everywhere. The Gerudo training ground is also one of the better side quests, but although it doesn't give the best reward, which is the ice arrows, the mini dungeon itself is incredibly fun and a great endgame activity. The most rewarding side quest in the game though is definitely obtaining the Big Goron sword. Now I know it's basically a series of fetch quests, but the end reward makes up for it 10 times over. The Big Goron sword is the strongest weapon in the game and well worth the time and effort it takes to complete this quest. The 100 Skulltula side quest is great for the first 50, but getting 100 is pointless and I never even bother nowadays. The reward for 100 is a mere 200 rupees every time you visit the man, but the game never requires this many rupees. The other side quests in the game are also not worth mentioning, as they usually just reward a heart piece or a bottle and are so basic that I wouldn't even really call them side quests. Overall, the game has a decent amount of side quests and activities to keep you busy, but most are not really worth your time or effort to complete unless you're going for 100% completion. Majora's Mask is a game that is literally 60% side quests, but that doesn't mean it automatically wins, but the sheer quality of side quests is outstanding. Almost every single side quest rewards the player with a unique mask, but the side quests are not just simple fetch quests like Ocarina. Take the Romani Ranch Cows side quest. The quest story itself is exciting and meaningful. We actually care for the owners of the ranch and want to help. The quest requires Link to fend off waves of ghost-like aliens as they attempt to steal the cows housed inside the barn. Completing this quest will open the door for a second part of the quest, which sees Link defending a cart full of milk. 2 mysterious cloaked riders attempt to steal the milk, and it's up to us to fend them off until we reach Clocktown, so that the milk bar can finally stock up on milk. After completion, we are rewarded with the Romani Mask. This allows Link access to the milk bar, which in turn opens the door for more side quests. The game is full of engaging side quests similar to this. The whole Andean Cafe quest is a perfect example too. It's a multiple stage side quest that doesn't only reward the player with a mask, but also rewards the player by making us feel like we have truly accomplished something. The Bomber's Notebook, the Bomb Lady, and even the hand in the toilet inside the Stockpot Inn are all great examples of fun and unique activities. It's only natural that a game focused around side quests would have the best side quests. So once again, this category has to go to Majora's Mask. All in all, both games are excellent games, but in terms of the more complete game, I have to pick Majora's Mask. No other game has ever made a more impactful impression on me like Majora's Mask has. But as I stated in the beginning, I have a special place in my heart for both games, and although Majora's Mask easily wins, that doesn't mean Ocarina of Time is a bad game. All Zelda games are masterpieces, and comparing a Zelda game to another Zelda game is almost impossible as they are all fantastic, but in this instance, Majora's Mask is a clear winner. I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who watched the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Just remember that this is based on my own opinions, but what I would love to know is your thoughts on either game, so let me know in the comment section below. If you did enjoy the content and want to see more, then subscribe to the channel, and also be sure to hit the thumbs up. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.